Hi Tracy, hi everybody. Welcome to our second in our series of Beyond L&D. Really excited to have our guest today, which is Tracy Gunn. And for those of you that aren't familiar with this series, it's all about looking, as the title suggests, beyond L&D. So 15, 20 years ago, those of us that were in L&D roles then, our influence within a business often just was limited to learning and development. We might have some influence about, lifelong learning and self-development, but the role of people in L&D today has so much more influence around individuals, company culture, even the world. So we're influencing things like use of carbon in learning and development, gender equality, diversity and inclusion, you mentioned it. And so that's one of the reasons Tracy's with us today. But Tracy, first of all, welcome, and tell us a bit about you and your day job.
So I run a company called Being at Your Best, and I've been doing that for the last 15 years now. So my background is in L&D. I was previously the head of leadership development for Marks and Spencer. And I'd always harbored this notion of working for myself. So almost 15 years ago, I struck out on my own. And I continued working as a freelance basis in learning and development. But people would frequently say to me, especially my mum, but what do you actually do? And in fact, I think if we asked my mum that question today, 15 years on, I don't know that she'd still be able to answer it. But when I tried to really define what it was that I did, I used to really struggle. And so, I do leadership and management development. And when I really got to think about why, what is it I actually do, I kept coming back to this sentiment of I help people, or I enable people to be at their best, whatever that looks like, because what it looks like for you, Catherine, different to what it looks like for me and for anyone listening on the line today. So that's really where the name Being at Your Best came from. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Or it's interesting actually how it's evolved over the years. So 15 years ago, it was very much about leadership management skills. I had an interest around that time in sort of well-being, stress management, nutrition, and the impact that could have on us. So my work kind of took a slant in that direction. How do we incorporate that into our business life? And then over the years, as my circumstances have changed and I've become a parent and, balancing running a business with a young family, the focus again has changed to what does being at my best look like as a parent, and that's a lot of the work that I do now around that space in terms of parenting and balancing both a career with a family.
Okay, so varied, and we first met, gosh, it must have been 15 years ago or something?
Yeah, I think pretty much when I began, absolutely.
And I still remember what you were wearing.
Is that good or bad?
I seem to remember what I was wearing and what other people were wearing. A really nice, smart pair of black trousers and a black, high-necked sort of tang. And you were wearing on your feet silver glitter pumps. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, that's brave in a corporate environment. But I was like, yeah, and I've actually got a pair of silver glitter pumps myself now. But that's something that's changed quite a lot, isn't it? How formal the corporate world was, and yet now everyone's wearing jeans and trainers and flip-flops and so sorry, I got a slight tangent there. Funny you should say as well, you said about asking your mum what when she's wondering what you actually do. I did take my mother to work one day. So I was like, come and watch me and do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And still, she didn't get it.
Okay.
I think she just thought I told stories, which is fair enough. So how long ago did you come up with the idea for Mumager? So just so everyone understands, Mumager is a would you call it a product or a stream within what you do at Being at Your Best?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of the big product areas that I would now offer. And in fact, is where I spend the majority of my time. So I think there's a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. And rather selfishly, I created it for myself. So I found going back to work, funnily enough, after my second maternity leave, harder than going back after my first. And I didn't help myself. And if anyone else is a freelancer out there listening, You may identify with the fact of when someone asks you to do something, yes, yeah, absolutely, I can do that. You want me to travel for 8 weeks back to back? Sure thing. You want me to go to Istanbul, Moscow, Frankfurt? Yeah, I can do that, with a 6-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old toddler at home. So I was really keen to get back. I was looking forward to getting back to work. I love what I do. And in hindsight, I took on way too much. Way too much. All of the things that I now talk about in terms of easing yourself back in and setting realistic goals, I didn't do that. So I was at a point where I felt like I was doing a pretty rubbish job at everything. I felt I wasn't being a good mum. I was traveling, I was away. When I was home, I was exhausted. I felt guilty that I'd been away, leaving the boys. And when I was at work, I just didn't feel like I was performing at my best. Now, I don't know that anyone else would have noticed, but when you just get that feeling of, I'm not being at my best here. So I came to a point where I thought, right, I come from a background of positive psychology, so what can I do to help myself? And with a very good friend of mine, we sat down and we looked at all the tools and tactics that we all know and we all talk about, and I began to apply them to myself. So once they started to work and I began to really feel more in control of everything, I began to think, well, is this just me? So with a bit of research, I didn't have to look too far to find out, no, it wasn't just me. There was many other women in my position coming back and really trying to struggle with that juggle. So I ran the first ever Mumager workshop, gosh, it'll be 5.5 years ago now, here in Ireland where I'm based. But then people started to say to me, but hang on, Tracy, what about the dads? Are you going to do a dadager? And then from my own background in L&D, I thought, well, if you don't have the support of the line managers, we can do a lot of talk, but unless they're willing to have conversations around flexible working options, perhaps working in different ways, then we're only ever going to get so far. So that's where the Mumager portfolio now extends to sessions for line managers, sessions for all working parents, because as we know, families come in all shapes and sizes, blended families, adoptive families, same-sex families, the list goes on. And then this specific workshop for the women who are coming back from maternity leave. And really the idea of that is helping people be at their best so that they can be great at home and they can be great at work. It shouldn't be a choose one over the other. We should, and I believe we can do both.
You have traditionally ran these face-to-face, but you're now running them virtually as well,
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, indeed. So we have all of the products can be delivered virtually, and in fact this week I'm delivering those for one of my clients, and I really think this is the way forward, so that people can access the learning in a way that's convenient for them. Also that it can extend the reach, so that it's not location specific, and I've got people who are located in all different places across Ireland and the UK, but also to think broadly, the challenges that we face are the same regardless of where I live in the world. So sky's the limit on the virtual element.
It's so true, and it fits with the whole idea of flexible working, which was trending all over social media actually yesterday. And I've pulled a few stats off your website, Tracy. 72% of women feel conflicted, balancing their family and career. 90% of parents find balancing family and work stressful, and yet only 33% of managers are aware that they're struggling to balance work and life.
Yeah.
That's worrying, especially because a lot of managers will also be parents.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And what we find is that, there's a big mentality of, I'll just get on with it. And most of us are really good at just getting on with it. And we put the face on to say, yeah, everything's fine. Whereas inside, it's often where we feel that struggle, and we don't always feel comfortable. I know I didn't myself feel comfortable in talking about it 6 years ago when I was at that quite difficult point. So I think it's that, the biggest shift I've noticed in the conversations I'm having is 5 years ago, I was kind of knocking on doors going, hey, have you thought about how you can support your women returning to work and your working parents? Whereas now, I don't really knock on very many doors. I have people coming to me going, we really want to do something in this space. How can you help us? So that's the biggest shift I've noticed, certainly in the last 2 years.
That's really encouraging, isn't it? I think that things are changing. I remember early on in my career, a manager asking me in a job interview, so now you've settled down with John, are you thinking about having kids anytime soon? And my reaction was, oh, no, of course not. And I now look back to that moment and I realized that was part of what I chose not to have children, and because I felt like I had to choose either my career or kids. And I know that that's a shame, and I know that that's wrong. And I know there are other reasons why I made those decisions as well. But it does, our work is such a huge part of our lives, and family is everything. It's just such a challenge. So how do you help people then? What's the advice that you're giving managers? How do they support their teams?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, Catherine. In fact, I'm going to link to a study that came out, I think it was just last week, and I'll send you a copy of the report so you can include it in the comments after this. But they did some research to say what practices have the biggest impact on equality at work, so men and women being able to, be in senior leadership positions, etc. And unsurprisingly, perhaps we found that having gender quotas can sometimes detract because it puts the focus on the perhaps wrong area. Whereas, no surprises, I'm sure, to many of us, it will be, the opportunity for flexible working, the opportunities for development, opportunities for support. So one of the biggest challenges I face, and what I find very interesting, is that I can go into an organization that has the same company policy, yet the working practices in different parts of that business are completely different. And I'll have people in the room going, oh, you're allowed to do that? Really? I'm not allowed. I was told no. And when I explore it further with line managers, I sometimes sense that there's a hesitation to even have the discussion about flexible working because they're afraid of what it might open up. If I do this, does that set precedent? Or will everyone want to do it? And by the way, I think this is a conversation not just for working parents, but for everyone, whether or not you have kids. We've all got stuff that's important to us in our lives, and I don't think working parents should necessarily get any preferential treatment. I think this is a conversation for everybody to have. But I still sense sometimes this reluctance with managers to have the conversation, and I wonder, and I'm curious about this, does it stem from the fact of, well, how do I have that tough conversation if that person isn't delivering? How do I set clear goals so that regardless of where this person is working, I know that they're delivering? Because, people should be measured on their outputs. So, yeah, that's some of the things that I would tease out with managers as to, well, why is it a no? Now, sometimes there might be a business reason. If you're a retailer, you have to have staff, manning the floor, etc. But very often there's a workaround, there's a way around things, and we just need to be a bit more, I suppose, flexible in our thinking as to how we can get around that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How there is that concern, isn't it, that if we give an inch, will somebody take a mile? And actually, most people just want to come to work, do a great job, have a great work-life balance. Like you said, it's relevant to everyone, isn't it? Because things like trying to get a dentist appointment or outside of working hours, it just isn't doable. And I read some research just this morning around flexible working, that flexible workers are generally healthier, they're fitter, so they actually exercise more, and they eat better as well. So there's huge benefits.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me ask you, think back to when you were a kid. So as a child, what was your personality like? And any of that sort of inform the choices that you've made in your career, do you think, today?
Right. Oh, I'm smiling because it's actually really nice to think about what you were like as a kid. Well, I grew up in the north of Scotland, so I had a lovely childhood, actually, growing up by the sea, and I'm the youngest of 4 children. By quite a bit, so my 2 sisters and my brother are much older than me, which meant I grew up almost like an only child. So I would have spent a lot of time at home, on my own, because where we lived, we didn't have too many other people around us. So I think that led me to actually be quite creative. So if I think about what I did when I was a kid, I spent a huge amount of time in make-believe games. And I would, just play very much on my own. And apparently my mum has this memory of me outside the front of our house on the fence. And I used to have an old horse's saddle and reins, couldn't think of the word, and I used to sit on this fence with the reins in my hands, and in my head I was going all around the world. So I spent a lot of time thinking up games, and I spent a lot of time doing artwork and projects and things. And I think if I think that how that translates into my work today, I love the creative side of my work, and I love thinking up new exercises, or how could we bring this to life, and what might that look like. So I can absolutely see that link. The other thing that has come to mind, and I'm actually thinking of in a previous podcast that you've done with Jen Rolfe, and thinking about messaging around, girls and boys and things like that. I can remember at the end of the day very often saying to my mum and dad, have I been good today? Have I been good? And looking for reassurance. And I think that's something that I carried into my working life as well, looking for affirmation, looking for feedback that I was doing a good job. Am I pleasing people? And I know from a lot of the research that I do, or the people I work with, many of us have that, we want to keep everyone happy, want to please people. And I'm actually trying to rebel a little bit against that. So of course, I like to be liked, and I want to do a really great job. But I think sometimes that means we have to speak up about things, or we have to be honest about what we think. And if we disagree with somebody, people might not always like that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So yeah, that's something that I'm aware of, and I can see how it can impact, how we are as adults.
It's a weird job that we've got as well, isn't it? Because at the end of every session that we deliver, whether it's an hour long or a day long, you get feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback, and that one piece of dodgy feedback. It's like, absolute killer, isn't it? But
yeah, and actually on that, if there's anyone from L&D listening, one of the most helpful mental shifts, I think, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Catherine, is when I first started delivering training, I wanted people to like me, wanted people to like the session, I wanted them to enjoy it. And I used to take a huge responsibility for that. And then something shifted where I thought, that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to present it in an interesting and engaging way, to make it clear, all those things. But actually, it's you as a participant, it's your responsibility to get something from it, to challenge your thinking. And when I made that mental shift, I noticed my approach changed slightly, and it was much more of an adult interaction as a coach, trainer, facilitator with the participants, rather than a sort of teacher. I'm here to tell you how wonderful this topic is. And I find that shift quite helpful. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Definitely, it's that shift from I'm not here to be liked, I'm here to do a job.
Yeah,
get a result. And something that we in the past have discussed is this idea of there's always going to be people in the room that will give you like the top feedback no matter what. They're always going to go, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be some people that are going to hate it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, let's just ignore the top and the bottom 10%. Yeah. It's the stuff in the middle that's probably more useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It still hurts though, doesn't it, when you get...
Absolutely.
Do you know, you reminded me of it's a mutual acquaintance of ours told me this story a few years ago, and she was running a workshop face to face, and there was this guy in the workshop that just kept looking at her with these like, I hate you eyes, I hate you, and she was like, I've not even met this bloke before, and he's like, he hates me instantly. So she was, trying to build rapport with him, and when she put people into groups, she got in a group with him to try and, build a connection. And at one point during the session, in one of these small groups, he looked at her and he looked at her and went, that's it. I knew you reminded me of somebody. You look just like my ex-wife. And I always remember that story to reassure myself that sometimes people won't connect with you or resonate with you or like you for completely random reasons that you cannot do anything about. There's nothing you could have done in that situation. So that reassures me.
Yes.
Maybe
that.
No, that's not the lesson there. So coming back to this whole idea of supporting parents and families and what organisations can do to help. I mean, we've established that it's improved so much more, even to the point of, I think, quite a few organisations were talking about this in recent years, but it was more talk. It was like we need to be seen to be doing the right thing, whereas now I think people really are getting the idea that this is like, it makes good business sense to get this right. What still needs to happen, and what are your hopes for the future?
Yeah, so I think, you mentioned there's a lot of talk, and I think there's still a lot of talk, and I think there's certainly a lot of action taking place as well. But as we know, it's all about that individual, and how well, if I think about it from a management perspective, first of all, what are they actually doing? Because it's easy to talk the talk, as we know it's harder to walk the talk. Yes, got that the right way around. So I think from a manager's perspective, it's really about thinking from the moment that somebody shares with you a significant life event, I'm going to become a parent, I'm going to adopt, I'm going through IVF, whatever it might be, is that we just ask. I think the biggest danger is to assume that means that person must want this. We don't know. Some people might want to be treated in exactly the same way. They don't want to be treated differently. Whereas other people might appreciate, well, look, you have a long commute. Let's think about how is this going to work for you? Or you're going to need time off. Let's think, because we've got to look at it realistically. Businesses still need to run. We've got deliverables that we need to meet. How are we going to make this work? Whilst that individual's away, it's not a case of out of sight, out of mind, but that if that person wants, there's kind of check-ins there. And then when somebody comes back to work, we think about how do we phase somebody back in. We all know what it's like to come back to work after a 2-week holiday. Coming back on a Monday, it's just the worst, isn't it? So why would you come back to work after an extended break on a Monday? Just don't do it. Seriously, come back on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Stagger that. Think practically about using some of that leave to phase your return back. It's good for the business and it's good for you. So I think there's very practical things that we can do. And then on an ongoing basis, the biggest epidemic that I see is this culture of just then people always being on and not having any boundaries between their working life and their home life. And I think, that has a huge impact on our productivity, on our mental health, and our well-being, happiness, all sorts of things. So again, this applies to everyone, not just working parents, but discussing as a team, right, what are healthy boundaries? If I'm leaving, so for example, I quite often will finish work at 3 o'clock and I'll go and pick my boys up. I might then choose to come back and do an hour in the evening. So people might get emails from me at odd times, but I do not expect a reply. And I will say that to people. So what do sensible, healthy boundaries look like? So if you are leaving early and you're catching up later, that you don't end up working all night and having no downtime or no time with your partner or time for yourself. So I think on an ongoing basis, both individuals and managers need to talk about having healthy boundaries.
It's a really good point. There's that, I linked in about this the other day, Adam Grant's stuff about different approaches to managing your time. So some people are segmenters and they like to be like, okay, work is work. I come to work at that time, I finish at that time, and then I don't want to think about it afterwards. And that's fine. And then there are integrators, I'm definitely one of these, where sort of work and life just merge.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. So I might choose to take an hour off, 2 hours off during the day to go for a run, but then I might, like you say, work into the evening. I work Saturdays and Sundays at the moment. But if I've got a line manager, that line manager should be at least having that conversation, as you say, to check in. Is this right? Is this working for you? And what's right for you?
Exactly.
There's something else about that I've heard people talk about when they've been off work for quite some time. Like in this day and age, companies, organizations change and evolve at such a pace. So much can happen in a year.
Yeah.
It must be really scary. It must be really scary coming back and feeling that maybe the people have changed, the culture's changed, systems have changed. Do you get people like feeling that quite a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it varies because some people choose to have some contact with work whilst they're off, and that works for them. Some people prefer to be like, leave me alone, this is protected time, don't want to find out. So it can be really, really daunting. I mean, I remember coming back to work and I stood up in front of a group of people and I went, morning everyone, my name's And I literally couldn't remember my name for it was probably only a split second, but it felt like an absolute lifetime. So, you can imagine that you're trying to get your head around this new system or new people, new team, new office, whatever it might be. So absolutely, the short answer is yes, people definitely feel that overwhelm. And I think that's where, again, practical things like encourage more companies now, certainly in the UK, have kit days, keep in touch days. So those are paid days. They're usually 3 days that you can just come into work, have a coffee with your colleagues, get an update on what's been happening. And I really encourage people to use those kit days to just start getting your head back into the work game. I think that can really help. The other thing that often helps is to have a buddy. So you don't always want to admit to your line manager, oh my gosh, I can hardly remember where the toilet is, never mind the passwords for the IT system. So just having somebody that you can help you navigate those first couple of weeks back can be really helpful as well, and take the pressure off people. So I'd always recommend that people think about that. So it's not quite so overwhelming.
That's really good advice. I love the idea of a kit day. Fantastic. And yeah. We'll put links to your website and everything with the blurb that supports this, so anyone, you can go and check it out. We're both animal lovers, aren't we? And what I'm loving is that more and more organisations are now giving people paternity leave. Have you heard about that?
I haven't, actually.
Yeah, so you get a new puppy and you can take maybe a week or some flexible, working time to settle your puppy in. I think it's just when you get companies that really do go the extra mile to appreciate that we're honest people, we want to do a good job, and they're flexible. What do you get back? Just loads of engagement, loads of loyalty, and loads of great work and productivity and results. So
exactly.
No-brainer, really. A no-brainer. Well, Tracy, I've enjoyed this. We need to keep talking. We will share this as a video and a podcast as well, so people can watch it or listen to it in any way that they want to. Let's keep talking. It's great. The work that you're doing is brilliant, by the way. So get the word out, and really pleased that you're now doing it virtually as well.
Yes, me too. So yes, check out the details, and if anyone would like to get in touch, we'd be really happy to talk to anyone after this today. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Tracy.
Bye.
See ya.